If there's one issue that is rapidly focused excitement, interest, and some trepidation, it's the issue of increasing automation and ultimately fully autonomous driving. This is a technological trend that, if realized, will have a profound effect not only on how we drive, but also fundamentally on how we live. Now, governments have clear concerns about the arrival of these technologies, both on the up and down sides, and they're starting to think about how to adapt to the regulatory framework to accompany these changes. And first, we have to ask ourselves a question: why would we want to increase automation in driving? Now, some would point out that we as humans are really bad drivers, and they would cite that over 90% of all injury or death-causing crashes involve human error. Full automation cannot get here fast enough because we have no business driving. But it's worth remembering that most of the time, humans are making thousands of micro-decisions that keep us safe and keep others safe in a very complex traffic environment. The fundamental safety challenge for vehicle autonomy will not be to avoid the mistakes humans may make, but rather to replicate all of the good decisions we make that keep us safe. Now, the public and authorities will likely have little tolerance for autonomous technologies if these lead to new types of crashes that are perceived as beyond human control, beyond our own control. Increasing vehicle autonomy may also contribute to smoother and more reliable traffic flows and to increase throughput on crowded infrastructure. Research suggests this potential is great, but we have yet to test it at scale. Safety, improved traffic, driver-occupant comfort. For these reasons, several companies have announced the commercial deployment of highly autonomous and ultimately self-driving vehicles in the future, in the very near future. Some as early as 2017, and all by 2030. Two of these are new to the industry, and one isn't even an auto manufacturer, at least not yet. And though one company has announced they will not make a fully autonomous car, many others are working hard at achieving that milepost. Now here's the thing: if these companies hit their targets, children born today may never need to get a driver's license to use a car, and their children may not be able to. At the core of increasing car automation is the challenge to gradually assist and then replace humans in perceiving the driving environment, planning to act based on that perception, and then carrying out that action in a safe way. This evolution is made possible by the deployment of a set of technologies, many of which are mature and some of which are already offered on current vehicle models. In terms of technology choices, manufacturers differ on whether these cars must communicate with each other and with infrastructure, and if so, what information they should share and how. Some countries have moved forward and put in place standards and plans for ITS infrastructure, but these investments may risk becoming stranded if the winning technological model for autonomy is built around a fully sensor-based platform. If data is to be communicated, it must be trustworthy and perceived as such. Strong encryption-based security arrangements will be necessary, and these will have an incidence on the regulation of data communications and privacy. But it also seems prudent to ensure a secure firewall between the network communications, even those secured by encryption, and systems that directly control safety-critical tasks like steering and braking. Vehicle autonomy can best be described by a spectrum of capabilities. Some can be deployed simultaneously, though most are sequential. For our work, we use the SAE's levels of driving autonomy, of which there are 5. SAE's levels primarily identify how this dynamic driving task is divided between human and machine. It is performed entirely by a human driver at level 0, where there's no automation, and entirely by an automated driving system at level 5, where there's full automation. The classification also details whether the human or the system is responsible for monitoring the driving environment, for steering, acceleration, and deceleration, and which of the two is responsible for the fallback performance of the driving task. It also indicates if the system can operate in only a few contexts or if it can operate everywhere. Now, it's here in the mushy middle where this task is shared simultaneously or sequentially, raising difficult questions of human-machine interaction. Current deployment and development necessarily focus on this middle, here the white line, but this is because full automation remains elusive. And as companies and public authorities focus on this task, it is worth looking at the future autonomous car fleet from a strategic perspective. Now, we have focused primarily on the technology that makes automated driving possible. At first, relatively little thought was given to what this technology changes, and the expectation seems to have been, and still continues to be, that little will change. People will still buy cars, much as they do today. It's just that sometimes the car they buy will be able to operate by themselves. But vehicle automation is just one part of the technology kit that will build the 21st century. Everything is changing. Personal computers, mobile telephones, and the internet have all converged with each other and are now blending with machines that sense and manipulate the physical environment. These machines include not just automated motor vehicles, but also drones, personal care robots, 3D printers, surveillance devices, and many, many others. Public authorities must understand how automated vehicles fit into much broader changes in society. Now, there are two pathways to full automation. Vehicles that do something everywhere, and here we gradually improve the automated driving systems available in conventional vehicles so that human drivers can shift more of the dynamic driving task to these systems. Or vehicles that can do everything somewhere, and here we deploy vehicles without a human driver in certain restricted situations and gradually expand this operation to more and more contexts. These pathways are not just for cars, but for heavy-duty vehicles and buses as well. These vehicles have great potential for more automated operation, for example, with bus rapid transit systems or container shuttles. The something everywhere strategy is generally embraced by traditional car manufacturers. Many of today's production vehicles are capable of driver assistance, and a small number of vehicles also incorporate an active lane keeping feature or parking assist that makes them capable of partial automation. Because of its assumption that the human driver will resume actively driving shortly after being prompted to do so, conditional automation raises particularly difficult issues of human-machine interaction that have not yet been satisfactorily solved. High automation, level 4 in the SAE scale, is challenging because it assumes the system can revert to a minimal risk condition should a human driver not resume actively driving. Reverting to this minimal risk condition may be easier in some contexts, like low-speed parking facilities, than in others. For this reason, a highly automated driving system is capable of operating in some, but not necessarily all, contexts. And one of the more promising contexts is motorway operations, where vehicle platooning represents a very promising application. Many urban and suburban applications, however, may be realized earlier through an everything somewhere strategy of non-conventional vehicles. Passenger shuttles and taxis might operate at low speeds in central business districts, corporate campuses, university campuses, retirement communities, resorts, shopping malls, airports, and other semi-enclosed environments as well. And also for first and last mile public transport applications. Delivery shuttles might likewise travel at low speeds along particular routes and at particular times of the day. Regulatory action is underway, but our scan revealed that all initiatives focus on testing, licensing, and operations of vehicles on public roads. To our knowledge, no jurisdiction has taken anticipatory action to change the regulatory structure surrounding some likely use cases for fully autonomous vehicles, like, for example, in providing long-distance road haulage or shared taxi-like and quasi-public transport services. These latter two are highly regulated sectors that could face significant disruption from the arrival of self-driving vehicles, especially if they're shared. In addition, laws are just one of the many regulatory tools at the disposal of public authorities. Motorists and motor vehicles already interact with rules via several regulatory gates. On the one hand, picking the appropriate approach is complicated by uncertainty on what it is that should be regulated and the risk that regulation may in fact lock in one automation pathway over a potentially better one. On the other hand, governments may be forced to make regulatory decisions sooner than they expect. For example, a driver licensing agency may receive an application from a disabled person who cannot legally drive under existing rules, but who asserts the right to operate an automated vehicle under an accommodations law. Another example could be a transport agency that has completed a lengthy benefit cost assessment for a major long-term infrastructure project, but now faces a legal challenge because it failed to account for the impacts of automation on demand, capacity, and revenue assumptions. So what are the policy considerations that we need to keep in mind? The first is, should we treat automated vehicles specially or generally? A general approach seems more appropriate as automation becomes more widespread and ordinary, but nonetheless, a specific approach may be a simpler and cleaner method of addressing an emerging set of technologies that require the development of particular expertise. Should we let policy lead or lag technology? Proactive policy, including specific rules, can provide companies the legal clarity they need to make investment and deployment decisions. Nonetheless, prematurely codifying requirements can freeze unrealistically high or low expectations into the law. Should we privilege uniformity or flexibility? Uniform regulation across multiple jurisdictions can reduce the cost and complexity for developers of systems that will necessarily cross both national and subnational borders. Flexible regulation, however, might more easily accommodate existing regional differences, local startups, and unique demonstration projects. And should we emphasize ex-ante or ex-post regulation? The choice between ex-ante regulation, particularly regulatory standards, and ex-post regulation, particularly recalls and civil suits, also implies flexibility. Forward-looking rules provide more certainty but less flexibility. Backward-looking measures provide the opposite. These trade-offs are particularly relevant to concerns raised about the liability of automated vehicle manufacturers and associated companies for injuries relating to their products. Now finally, I think it's important to highlight three of our findings that seem relevant to authorities. The first is that incrementally shifting the driving task to machines and to algorithms and away from people will require changes in insurance. Liability remains an important barrier for the manufacturers and designers of autonomous vehicles. Expanding public insurance and facilitating greater private insurance could provide sufficient compensation to those injured by an automated vehicle. Enhanced vehicle insurance requirements by manufacturers, especially if combined with greater flexibility in the administration of this insurance, could also provide a third-party check on the safety of automated systems. New insurance arrangements may have an impact on what information developers and manufacturers of autonomous vehicles share and with whom they share this information. Governments may seek to encourage developers to share specific data about their products and processes in order to benefit from more flexible regulation. In some cases, it may be worthwhile auditing specific algorithms that directly impact public welfare. For example, those that govern loss decisions by automated vehicles. And finally, regulators and developers should actively plan to minimize legacy risks. Vehicles with automated driving systems that are introduced in the next few years will be neither perfect nor will they be transitory. Years after these early models have become outdated, many of these vehicles will still be on the road. A key goal for both regulators and developers of these vehicles should be limiting the physical risk of these systems through a variety of technical and contractual tools to enable monitoring and over-the-air updates.